Hello, everybody. Welcome back to the Training, Learning, and Development Communities Accessible and Inclusion Design Conference. Let's see. Thanks for joining us here. And let me just take a look. I had Yvonne on a second ago, and it looks like she disappeared, but I'm sure she'll be back in a moment. Yes, it looks like everybody is starting to pop into the room. Hello, Cindy. I see your chat. Thank you so much for being here. Let's see. And yes, so as you can see, I am sitting down, which I don't normally do, but it has been a long day. And so I'm actually sitting down. You can see all my wires and my music junk behind me. I apologize for that. But I am very happy to be here and very happy to introduce you to Yvonne Urra-Bazain, who is a catalyst for progress in the e-learning industry, boasting an ever-growing expertise in inclusive design. It's true. We were just talking about it. Her unique background, which encompasses problem solving for medical and sales firms, as well as a decade of dedication to K through 6 education, sets her apart. So she is a transitioning teacher. She used to do elementary school, like I guess it was 10 years. And now she is a presenter. She did DevLearn last year for doing an Articulate presentation, and is going to be doing a workshop in Las Vegas at DevLearn this year as well. So that's really, really impressive. They don't usually, I mean, they only like to take on workshop instructors that are of a very high level. So that's really impressive, Yvonne. Yvonne effectively combines the approach of, I don't even know this word, and I wanted to ask you about it. Hudagogy? Did I say that right? Yes? Great.
That
Or
sounds good to me.
self-determined learning. I wish I knew. I just had never seen that word before. With key marketing strategies and visually compelling design principles to facilitate the enhancement and evolution of professionals. Yes, and Daphne sings, so inspiring, Yvonne. I agree. All right, Yvonne. So I'm going to let you take it away. This one is Digital Empathy Lab, simulating for diverse user experiences. And again, thanks everybody for being here. Last session of the day. And I'm going to go ahead and hide myself and let you take it away. Thanks, Yvonne.
Thank you, Luis. I'm so excited to be here. My name is Yvonne Urra-Bazain. I am a former teacher. I was a K-6 teacher for 10 years. I graduated from the University of Hawaii at Manoa, if anyone here has connections to Hawaii. So I might say aloha or other terms like mahalo, and that's part of one of my first languages, although I'm not Hawaiian by ancestry. My pronouns are she, her, and in order to describe myself for anyone here who might need some image descriptions, I'm wearing a purple shirt with my company logo Brilliant in white text on it. I have a black headset on, and there are different things in my environment. I live in an RV. My family and I travel year round. We stay in small towns usually. Every 1 to 2 months. And I'm seeing we might have some audio issues. I apologize. I hope everyone can see and hear.
I think the audio is good on this end. So I'm sorry for some of the folks that aren't getting it. I'm getting it pretty clear. So maybe you might have to log out and log back in. Folks that, oh yeah, there you go. Refreshing fixed it for Melissa. So yeah, same with Cindy. So sorry about that. Not sure what's going on, but yeah, we'll let you continue. Thanks, Yvonne.
Okay, yes. I'm going to share my screen, and while I navigate sharing my screen, I'd like to share with you as well that in addition to being accepted for a pre-conference workshop at DevLearn, and that conference is completely about authoring accessibly. So we're looking at 7 hours of real life, in-person practice together in a social learning environment. So we'll be looking at using access personas. We'll be building documents and making them accessible, or checking for accessibility testing and remediating if needed for accessibility in documents, as well as interactive presentations, specifically PowerPoint, and also Storyline as the current industry standard for meeting that need. And I'm trying to share, so I hope it goes through correctly. My apologies if we have to pivot a little bit. Can everyone see my screen? All right, I love seeing all of those emojis. They're so helpful. Thank you all so much. So this is the session called Digital Empathy Labs, Simulating for Diverse User Experiences. And there are a few ground rules or expectations, I suppose, to help you anticipate what the session will be. I really love being able to invite a social learning experience for everyone. So beyond me sharing a little bit here and there, if you have any comments about any questions I might pose in the presentation, please feel free to use the chat. And I'm hoping that I will be able to keep up with the chat and really make this a sort of virtual workshop experience for us all, so that we're all experiencing a knowledge base together. And I will start off by looking at that session description that was presented earlier. It's currently stated that we'll be combining user experience practices with designing for accessibility. We'll discuss the role of digital empathy labs for simulating diverse and hidden layers of user access. And then we'll join the virtual field trip to explore a sample empathy lab and discuss our key takeaways with other participants in this social learning session. So again, I invite you to comment or enter into the chat as often as you would like, and as often as I can keep up, I will also respond. What I'd like to highlight today is that term user experience, as well as diverse and hidden layers. So one of the benefits of having a workshop like this, where there's interactivity, is that all of us have unique experiences that we bring to our work. It is with that user experience that we are able to check our own products. However, as we all know, our user experience is limited. So we need to rely on the user experiences of as many people as we possibly can get, especially those people who might be marginalized and may not be in the mainstream for what access looks like or what an experience looks like. And that's kind of where we're going to be focusing our attention, is in those marginalized user experiences. And some of us may have overlaps where we can identify and relate to those experiences. It's important that we all have a place to discuss what works best for us and also understand what works best for other people. So sometimes when I approach accessibility, I think of it like playing a game of a hidden object exploration. You know, one of those games where they give you an image and you need to find the objects, but you might not know what the objects really look like or what the object might look like in that particular instance. And here's an example of something like that. This is a hidden object game screen. It may present as fairly chaotic, and the image description I have for it says, hidden object screen from a game displaying a variety of everyday items. And one reason I didn't describe all the items that might be pertinent in this hidden object game is because my question to you is, if you would like to, in the chat, upon looking at this hidden object game, and I'll see if I can zoom in a little bit. Oh, it's the same size almost. What do you think are the most important objects that you can see? From your user lens and your experience, what would be vital objects in this image? And as people comment, I'll read out our participant, the chat in our participation in the chat so that people who might have visual impairments will get an idea of what's on the image. So I'm seeing desk, suitcase, flowering succulent and a diary, notebook, sandwich, suitcase, desk, lamp, table, suitcase, lamp, window, lamp, magnifying glass, keys, window, and I will refresh to see new window, magnifying glass. Depends on the person. My glasses, or Monique's glasses, and hidden scroll that tells me what her mission is or what her mission might be. Hot beverages, bat, coffee and tea because we need caffeine, ace of spades. It depends on the context the image is being used for. Food, flashlight, keys, things that might be needed for mission. And I'm going to pose the question in a different way next. When I had asked what might those most important things be, we've come to a realization that our answers are really dependent upon the question being more specific. And sometimes when we are asked, I'm asked often, hey, here's a document, please make it more accessible. And it's like a hidden object game. I have to decide what are the goals for this document. And that's where being able to have certain questions specified really helps. So even though things of note are right before us, and though we may not know how to direct our attention to those hidden object things unless we have certain guidelines. So what do you need to know? What context do you need to better answer the posed question? How could the question be more specific for you? So I'm seeing only what's instructionally relevant to the learner. Yes. So what do we need to know in order? Yes, what is the goal? Why are we using that image? What are we trying to portray? Who is this designed for? What are our learning objectives? That which helps us achieve the learning objectives. Yes, and those are all wonderful points to make. So when I am given my hidden object games of make this accessible, I need to direct my attention in typically 3 ways. First, if I have access to a primary source, I ask who. Who is this made for? Who is the person who's determining what's most important for them? So this is where we want to get feedback from real user experiences. And that's how we can get to know our user or our learner or our participant, depending on how you frame your participant in your practice. We also want to know how to achieve certain goals for them. What are the end needs of the user? And what is their experience like if we don't have that primary source? If we're not able to have access to user acceptance testing, or if we don't have the ability to have a consultation from a real user with specific access needs that is similar to the potential audience that we are developing for. We can use certain tools to simulate for their experience. And though it's a secondary source, we can use those simulations and those previous conversations to create access personas. And that's another way to create more accessible, designed for everyone sort of learning experiences. But how do we usually approach accessibility? We look at lists. We look at what needs to be changed and what needs to be checked. So lists and guidelines like WCAG standards, which are vital. I cannot do my job, and many of us cannot do what we do without having some sort of list to guide our practice and remind us of what's important for a variety of users and what would benefit most people or all, if possible. Progress over perfection. So those 3 questions are necessary. And I really feel that we gain an understanding about why something is important when we can develop empathy about how that user is experiencing it. So today, our focus will be on that how, that secondary source, where we're going to use certain tools in a virtual field trip to simulate experiences we might not have had ourselves, or we might not have considered even a possibility. And then, before I move on, I do want to say that our lists are powerful. But even if we saw that image of the hidden object, the hidden object illustration with certain words on it, we still might be at a loss for what those words mean. So if we do not have perspective about what WCAG guidelines mean or WCA guidelines mean, or what checklists for accessibility really mean, we still might not be able to really meet the needs of our users. So for example, oh, my image didn't show up, but it was a picture of, and thankfully I put my alt text in, oh, there's my image. My image is there and my alt text loaded. I'm so glad. This is why accessibility matters for everyone. The WCAG 1.3 adaptable principle, specifically 1.3.1 info and relationships guideline, under conformance level A, which is our very basic, most minimum conformance level, says information, structure, and relationships conveyed through presentation can be programmatically determined or are available in text. I'd like you to put in the chat, what do you think that means? If you've had experience with it and you can explain it to other people, that's amazing. If you're just reading this for the first time and you're asked to help someone meet this standard or item of conformance, what do you think this means? Information, structure, and relationships conveyed through presentation can be programmatically determined or are available in text. And I'm going to scroll up so we can see an image of what that looks like in a WCAG report. I use this as a reporting tool when I do audits, or if I'm doing a template or storyline file accessibility test. I will use all the WCAG standards. So I'm seeing programmatically determined equals HTML semantic elements. It is accessible. You can get a transcript or focus order. Maybe programmatically determined means can be interpreted by a screen reader or other such tech. Available in text would possibly mean more like a textbook. If a process is shown in a graphic, it should also be described in text. Yes, so these are great points coming in. And did you know that this particular standard is info and relationships? So another part of this standard, in addition to what people have been discussing, is really simply, does it have headers? Are headers programmed into it? So if you're in a Word document, are you using the header style to say that this is a header, instead of just using bold or italics, which a screen reader cannot programmatically determine as separate? It also needs to be written in plain text, yes. So this particular standard, unless we have had a lot of experience reading about or talking to people about why this is important, we may not have the necessary context to even really understand the why or the how behind this. Thankfully, in this image, you might note, and if you are not able to note, I will do my best to point it out to you. There are links about understanding the standard better, as well as what the specifics and nuances are for meeting the standard. So W3C and WAI, the Web Accessibility Initiative, they do great work in making sure that all of the guidelines are accessible cognitively through multiple types of learning experiences. However, it is not always, regarding our timing, it's not always easy for us to have to read and relearn all of these things every time we're doing a report. So having an experience can sometimes drive in a point faster than any other report or article that we need to reread to refresh on. All right, so back to this hidden object. If we are given a list of items, if you've ever played a hidden object game, it'll come with a list of items. And one of my user frustrations is that some of the items listed, I have no idea what it looks like. Or I might not know what it's supposed to look like in this image. For example, if I told you thumbs up when you can find the Aquarius symbol, I'm curious to see when all the thumbs up will show when you find the Aquarius symbol. I saw a laughing emoji, another laugh. Anyone see an Aquarius symbol? So what questions are popping up in your head? Do we know what an Aquarius symbol looks like? Maybe. Where could it possibly be on this image? Yes, what does that look like? If you're given a checklist and we have no idea how even to entertain the items on the checklist, we might need to search Google for that. I agree. There's additional research that needs to be done because we don't have that user experience. We don't have that experience with the Aquarius symbol. And here, if you can see my lagging cursor, the Aquarius symbol is located above the numbers on the suitcase. It looks like a water sign or I guess air sign. And I'm trying to catch up with our chat here. Couple of wavy lines, very Ghostbusters. I love it. So again, what if I told you now that this is a hidden object screen from a game displaying a variety of everyday items, and there are a few objects considered most important to a specific person or a specific user, and this user's name is Claudia. What do you think they might be? I'm going to share out my link in the chat to my presentation, and I'm going to navigate to this page. This page I will also share in the chat. This is a series of what the government of UK, their digital accessibility unit, calls their digital or virtual empathy lab. And their contribution to empathy labs that are housed online are these user personas. So in order to learn what is important to Claudia, we would need to ask her questions. And this is that primary source layer, that who is our audience? And Claudia is a partially sighted screen magnifier user. So she says, my screen magnifier has made it possible for me to use the web again. I just wish more companies kept their websites simple. And what does that mean? So it means that Claudia uses either overlay tools or maybe even her browser tools. I'm not sure that you can see it, but I'm going to be using my browser tool to zoom in. If a website is simple enough, the cells or however it is created with divs or however it is coded should be able to scale for a magnifying user. And as someone who has so far 2020 vision, even I find myself magnifying into text and images all the time. I find it such an important, and this is the term, programmatic availability. So that means in the authoring tool or in the browser, it is programmed for me to have certain options to adjust it to my needs as a user so that Claudia as a user can improve her own user experience by adjusting because the program allows her the ability to make changes and accommodate or modify for herself. So if we were to read more about Claudia, and I'm going to zoom out, we may start to get an idea of what is important to Claudia. So if I go back to this image, now with our who in place, could you list down what things would be important to Claudia in this situation? A magnifying glass. Glasses, yes. And I saw a few comments. I saw Kimberly's that the moment when you get so used to these tools that you try to zoom into a physical book. Yes. I was in a waiting room and I had a magazine open and I was trying really hard to pinch zoom out on the magazine. It took me a good 30 seconds before I realized I couldn't do that. Light, the camera, magnifying glass, eyeglass, flashlight. I'd like you to compare, now that we know who the who is to our question, compare the list we're generating as a group to the list we were generating when we were only looking through our own lens. Has it changed for you? Do you have overlap with your answers? Or has entertaining another perspective possibly changed the direction of our attention? So to continue on with this investigation, and typically, I'm not sure if I mentioned it earlier, I have the great opportunity to host a monthly lab, and we do breakout rooms and everyone gets to dive deep with their own practice as much as we can. And sometimes our group is small and we stay in one room and chat like this, which we will stay in today. But in our investigation, I'm going to give you the links so that you can join along if you would like, and you have that user option if it's better for you to do separately. You are welcome to do that. I will also be displaying it on the main screen because I might have some access permissions or some browser extensions already preloaded on my laptop that it might take you time to get all set up. And I understand that can be problematic. So what we're going to continue with now is a quick lab. And when I host Accessibly Collab, we use this quick lab format. We have an hour and I pose a question. We focus on this question as a prompt. So today's question is, how could Digital Empathy Lab support designing for accessibility? Our investigation today will be joining a virtual field trip. And in a few minutes, I'll post those links for you so you can also join separately if you'd like. And we'll shout out in the chat to create this social learning environment for us all. And that will be our collaboration portion of this session. And at the end, I'd really like for us to have time to summarize our own user experiences and respond to this virtual field trip together as a group. We'll look back at our main question, how could Digital Empathy Lab support designing for accessibility? And break it down for ourselves, give ourselves time to process and decide if this is a valuable use for our practice. Okay, and thank you, Cindy, for answering a question I may have missed earlier. I do appreciate the support. All right, so whenever I start an investigation, I find it really important to lay some ground rules for how I hope that we will be able to join together in discussion. And I call it our civil rights opportunity. I could speak at length about that, but very briefly, I'd like to say that I hope we will practice empathy by going through these empathy labs. We're going to be using tools to simulate user experiences that we did not have access to before with our own lens. And that means this is a time to invite our curiosity. There's always something new to learn about other people's experiences. And the AIDC conference this year has proven that I believe, with each presenter sharing a new nuance for me as a learner about how they work in the world and how they interact with digital interfaces. So there's always room for problem solving. Even as much as we think we've completed something, there's always another way to make it even better and more accessible moving forward as technology improves and as our expectations rise. And real world examples teach us. We will be looking at some real world websites. They're not perfect. They are tools and we will use them as examples. Our goal is not to cast judgment. Our goal is to assume, in this instance, for our needs and purposes, that inaccessible content might be inadvertent because we all are learning through how to better design for each other and for people we've never met yet. And so I would like us to assume, if possible, that issues we might see could be due to lack of exposure. Our goal today is to broaden our own exposure and to really be able to develop true empathy. Because empathy doesn't happen unless you can have some sort of comparable experience. These are the two virtual labs that we'll be looking at. The first, and I will open it up so that I can send you the link, is that UK.gov accessibility personas list. So very briefly, they created 7 different accessibility personas. And when we click on each, or select each, like for Claudia, we'll see a little image of her avatar and some very high level information about who she is and how she interacts with digital environments. If we go to the link that says persona, and I'll open it in a new tab, we'll also see that more detailed persona with information about her device use, Zoom text, speech to text, some of her goals and wishes, really getting to know her as a user, her pain points or her frustrations. And then finally, some ideas for how to make things better. And I love this, for Claudia. It's not just for everyone with specific needs that are like Claudia, but for Claudia. And this is where, again, I think designing with people in mind is critical. There are so many people I've been able to meet in my travels that have different stories and different wonderful things to share about how they approach the world and how they approach access to things online. And I learn from each of them. And when I design now, I sometimes imagine that person when I'm designing things, like my relatives who have aphasia currently, or a relative of mine who is neurodivergent, and people in my life who have audio processing disorders, someone in my life who is blind. These people color my thoughts when I design and I think of them. So I love that it says making things better for her. It's very personalized, but it can also be broadened to many people. And these are some quick tips about what to do. We'll dive a little deeper into this in just a few minutes. But before we do, I'd like to also send you information about Funkify. And I'm specifically looking at the simulators page. So this is part of our virtual field trip. Funkify is a browser extension. It looks like these pair of glasses on my browser. Oh, I see that the overlay is not showing. I apologize that the overlay is not showing. But if you were to click on the simulators on the left and scroll down once it loads, the page should change. I might have some internet difficulties there. But what happens is it will provide some feedback about how they created these simulations. And it is a a browser overlay. So we'll see if I can get back on there. If not, you are welcome to check it out on the site. If you download the extension, I believe you have a free trial period of 4 days that you can test out the top or half, the first top half of the browser extension simulations. All right, so this is some information about their dyslexia simulator. And again, the websites we'll be looking at are imperfect. There are things we might want to change right off the bat. For example, I have trouble with the text being so close to the image. But that aside, it provides some information about how they created their extension, including down in the bottom that they gathered data from experienced test personas. So they did the primary source testing with real users and then used a combination of their research to develop something like what those users said they're experiencing. And I'm going to try it out. Let me know in the comments or in the chat if you're able to test it out as a browser extension. On my end, I'm seeing a Funkify overlay, and it says people's names, the personas' names. One person has blurred vision. I'm going to see if, so I clicked on Blurry Bianca. It's my preference just to call her Bianca instead of naming her with the descriptive word in front. So I will reference these characters by their names. But you can now browse any website with this overlay using the disability simulator. And on my end, because I do have a premium subscription, I'm able to adjust how blurry something might be. So in the chat, and as I go through these simulators with you, and I know time is of the essence for us, I'd like you to start processing and thinking about how would this change the way you design this website? If this was your user experience, what would you do differently? What changes would you make to your own base design so that it would be better for other people as well? Yes, we'd want our fonts to be larger. We'd want higher contrast to the text. Yes. And these are all things on our accessibility list. A thicker font instead of those thinner typefaces. Yes. So if I increase the blur, that creates even a greater problem for me. Now, if I were to stop this simulation and do another one, this one is Carl. And Carl, the Carl filters allows me to see this website with different color vision options. So currently I have normal vision selected. I can also view the website as if I was representative of 1 in 30,000 people who have achromatopsia. I can also look at this site if I have green weakness. So I can scroll through the site and an entire filter is overlaid over the site to simulate what it would be like to be like 1 in 20 men. 1 in 20 men see the world or see this website, something like this. How then would we change our color choices if we knew that 1 in 100 men and 1 in 300 women had a red-green weakness or a red-green, sometimes it's called, what is it? I have a loss for words, where red and green, there's a difficulty between those two colors where they have difficulty differentiating the two. Yes, so low color vision for the colors red and green, as well as protanopia. And it goes on. There's even a blue and yellow filter. Now on images, this might not be problematic. However, I'm going to go back to our accessibility persona site. And I apologize. I know sometimes switching screens can become a visual trigger for some people. I should have prefaced that a little earlier. We're going to look at, in this example, I'm going to go back to another user. In an accessibility collab this past Monday, we looked at this user earlier. His access persona, or accessibility persona, is Powell. And this is what's presented to Powell. As a user who identifies with being on the autistic spectrum, Powell said in his access report, or in his interview, that he has anxiety about being timed. One of the accessibility standards or guidelines is that if time is important, that the user has an option to stop it. Currently, as Powell, I do not have an option to stop this, so this might become problematic. On the very bottom, the direction says, click the blue button. I'd like in the chat if you could talk about why that would be problematic. And now I'm going to also use Funkify to see how this might change if we have different color vision. Color blindness for blue. Right, so let's try, if it's grayscale, if you have achromatopsia, how do you solve this problem? How do you follow this direction? What do you do? Click the blue button. How about now? It seems like I can perceive blue using this filter. What about this filter? This filter is for that red-green trouble differentiating. So how could we reword it? Select yes, avoid click, because that is assuming our mode of operation is with a mouse. If the user's using a keyboard, it is more globally acceptable or accessibly acceptable to say select or choose. I love that that's added there. The center button, the middle button. What's another way? Select save, because there is text there, save. And we would hope that in the alt text or in the programming of this website, that they included the word save within the code, so that our screen reader would read that button as save instead of as an image, or just button, as some screen readers might do. So that is Carl's filter. I'm going to also show you an example of Danny, and this is my heads up. Danny identifies as having extreme dyslexia. So we'll experience a little bit of how Danny describes how he sees text or perceives text. And what do you notice is happening now that we're looking at this text as Danny? I agree. I love digital empathy labs. I love personal empathy labs. And I think everyone who deals with digital products should be able to have a set of tools like this. It changes the way we are experiencing this site, as if we had the experience of someone else. Filters are so incredible for me. So what do we notice is happening for Danny? What are some things we would need to solve for a user like Danny, who, when he's trying to read a wall of text, is confronted with the difficulty of the text changing positions for him? There's one thing I'd like to draw your attention to. If the letters are moving, how can he read it? He might need to hear it. So enabling the ability to use a screen reader using a correct focus order might be an important thing. We could add more space between the rows. Yes. We can break up the text. Yes. So going back to 1.3.1 and having a hierarchy, maybe including more headings, maybe bullet points, things to separate the text and show relationships between them. So it's not just a wall of jumbled letters. For Danny and other people who have this experience like Danny. I'd like to also draw your attention to capital letters. What do you think is the advantage perhaps of using sentence case or title case? And what are some disadvantages of, let's say, this acronym or initialism that's all in capitals? What are some problems we'd be facing as Danny if the words are moving? The uppercase is harder to read. It's harder to identify the first letter of the initialism. If all of them are capitalized, how do you figure out what the word is? If we look at the heading here, flu medication, the capital letter F gives us a clue about what this word could mean. And even when the F interchanges or interposes its position, we still have a clue, a semantic clue about that word, that it starts with a capital F. When you're writing in all caps, and you might have an experience like Danny, it's a hidden object game. We're just going to be guessing what something is and selecting different items until we figure out what it could be. Imagine the frustration when we do not include experiences like Danny's in our design process. Yes, so that is supposed to be, let's turn off the filter. And now, without that lens, we default to our own experience. It says CDC. And how difficult would it have been to not be able to turn off and on an experience if someone isn't considering you when they design something. So on the success part, and my scroll wheel went down very quickly, on this accessibility site, if you go to the back button and down to where it says version 2 fixes, they provide you with an example of how they might change this experience for this particular user. And again, this site is looking at Powell. Powell said he has trouble with time. It's an anxiety point for him. He really needs text to be clear, plain language, as we brought up earlier. Powell also is benefited by, again, guideline 1.3.1, which was in the beginning when we were trying to figure out what does that mean, programmatically determining information and relationships. There's a heading structure. There's a hierarchy. If it's programmatically determined, I'm curious to see if you'll be able to see my view source of the web page. It's okay. This would be labeled as heading 1. So a screen reader will say heading level 1, or however that particular screen reader reads that. So we'll know, the learner will know, using their preferred mode of operation, what the relationship is of this header to the other headers. This might say heading level 2. And in my user experience, I see that header level 2 is smaller than heading level 1. And that's how I visually perceive there's a relationship, there's a hierarchy happening. And also my previous experience with reading and writing teaches me that there might be a pyramid model being used. And that's another can of worms, where the most important or the broadest part of a learning is at the top, and specifics or least important facts and details come down to a point at the bottom. So we have a hierarchy with most important global title at the top, and more specifics growing smaller toward the bottom. Those are simple, what we consider simple things that are right in front of our eyes that we might not consider until we have a simulated experience. And because we have only 10 minutes left, I'd like to show you just one more simulation. And this one is for, on my Funkify, I have the premium subscription. I chose the $5 a month subscription. I have an overlay called Robot Robin. I do not use this for my accessibility testing, but it's really interesting to see because it will show us, oh, if I can get it to move, oh, that's again not perfect. It should be able to show us different headings, and I switched tabs to see if I can accommodate the way that this is laid out. We'll try it again. Oh, I see it's having trouble. So in the heading pane on the right instead, it shows how the back end, that hidden layer that we don't see on the surface, on the front end of this website, this is the programmatic part, the back end coding. We can perceive that heading 1 is issues for Powell. Heading 2 is how bird flu is treated in the US. Heading 3 are all of these subtitles or subheadings, and it returns to a heading 2 level. So Funkify also has this ability, so you can check, like with other testing tools, you can check really quickly what even color contrast ratios are between two colors. And here it just shows an overlay of what that high contrast ratio is between this off-white and off-black, because pure white and pure black will have about a 21 contrast ratio, if I'm not mistaken. I also appreciate that if there are images, and I may need to navigate to something with an image, it will tell me, oh, this image does not have alt text. It was labeled as decorative. So I can go through different websites and get a perspective of what it would be like if I were a screen reader user and not using my visual abilities to experience it. There's also this beta version of a screen reader wand where I can hover over things and it'll let me know if it was accessibly written for a screen reader. And this image that I'm hovering on, it's highlighted in a blue accent color. The screen reader wand says that there's no text programmed for this image, and we call it alternative text. So that means alt text is an alternative to having an image there. Is there a text representation of that image instead? And that benefits a lot of people, even with our presentation earlier when my screenshot didn't load, but thankfully there was already some alt text present. We could still proceed with understanding and accessing information at a comparable level without needing to rely on our vision of the image. And this is one problem I've had with this particular overlay. I saw that, does this tool work with storyline courses? I've not had it work for Review 360. I haven't tested it from an LMS yet. I usually use Funkify when I'm doing a quick web browsing and I'm just curious about how something was laid out. Then I'll enable Funkify to give me some ideas about how that goes. When I do test Storyline, I'm using other tools for sure. And if we had more time, I would show you a list of my tools that I use for web reporting. But for our purposes today, and for the last 6 minutes of our time together, I'm going to turn off my Funkify filters and go back to our main question. And I apologize, I'm closing out these screens. I'd like us to really discuss and chat and have some time to process. What was this experience like for you? Was there a new perspective that you've gained about other people's experiences? How could Digital Empathy Lab support designing for accessibility? And one great question that was brought up was, if we can't use this for Storyline, that might not be an authoring tool that we can use this to test with. But how could having some sort of virtual simulation like this benefit you or your company or anyone who is tasked or privileged with the ability to design for the web or for digital products? And I'm going to give us some time to process that. Typically, I'd love to share the mic. I'm an introvert on my own. And while we're possibly typing out our responses, I'm going to be looking through the chat to see if there's anything I might have missed. I see that Abby said, these labs are a powerful tool for designers to experience things firsthand and build experiences that solve the pain points. Do I know if it works on PowerPoint, Word, or PDF? I haven't tested this particular simulator yet, but that is a great question. I wish I had something right off the bat that I could pull up, but I need to be careful about NDA on my laptop. Otherwise, I'd love to test that with you right now. I think it would be especially helpful for developers who broadly want to do the right thing but are just getting started building empathy. Yes. Think of how cool it would be to be a leader in this area. Talented people would rush to join the company. Yes. And what is stopping us from creating our own company-wide empathy labs or even virtual experiences that we can share with our own companies? Are there limitations in your particular situation? Or are there opportunities that you can think of where you could share something like this with a colleague or someone who's responsible for accessibility in your organization? Okay, I think being able to show someone this type of lab could persuade them to see the benefits making something accessible. Seeing the dyslexia filter was very eye-opening to me. I knew what dyslexia was, but have never imagined it quite like that. I love it for developing assessment tools for teachers and counselors. It helps us to check our understanding of our learners as we design our courses. These labs give you perspective that you wouldn't otherwise have. Exactly. So when we simulate for user experiences, when we are even able to interview users and watch users test our own work, which we don't always get to have, when we can see how other people interact with our products, it is a game changer for how we can really tailor and customize and make accessible for as many people as possible. Again, this is our civil rights opportunity. It is important. I believe it's important and exciting that we can really impact how people can use and access information in the information age, or in, I don't know what it's called now, the rocket age. I'm not sure what we're calling it now. But if our greatest tool is information, providing as many people as possible with access to that information should be one of our top goals. I really believe that. So these labs gives you perspectives that you wouldn't otherwise have. The sim labs are great motivators for designers and inspirations for solutions. Would you be able to share a list of the tools you use? Yes, I can definitely share a list of tools for sure. I will need to figure out a good way to do that after the conference today. I'm getting ready to start visual design and UX design classes in a few weeks. I'm so excited to share everything I learned with the other students. Yes, let's all build better user experiences together. I love it. Well, I believe we are at time. I don't know if there are any specific questions. I really wanted this to be a time when we could discuss and look at things together, and you all did such a great job providing your expertise and your perspective to our discussion. Thank you.
That was really amazing, Yvonne. Thank you so much for the presentation. That was so much here. Anybody else going to watch this one over again? This is going to be a great resource. All
I'm so
right.
glad.
Yeah, I'm just checking. Yeah, lots of thank yous. What a great way to end the day. I like Abby's comment. Abby hasn't taken a field trip since she left the classroom.
Thank you for coming on this field trip, everyone.
Yeah. No, thanks for posting that, Samantha, and definitely yes, we'll be gathering up resources and posting them after the conference completes. And remember, all of the recordings you can access all the recordings like just shortly after the each session completes. You can go back to here into AirMeet, go into the schedule, and you can watch the replays. And then after the event wraps, I download everything and format them, just put like a little intro and outro slide, and then post them. I'm going to be posting them on YouTube and gathering them in one place so everyone can access them. So yeah, Yvonne, thanks again. Really appreciate it. And I find it so interesting that you're just in your RV and you're like driving around different places. It's so cool. Just really, really interesting. Let's see. So I am going to go ahead and just close out the session. Yeah, we're at time 3:02 p.m. Pacific time. And with that, thanks again, everybody. Don't forget tomorrow. Gosh, we have 3 sessions tomorrow, the final day of the event. It's been quite the week. And let's see, my brain isn't quite working. Oh, yes, Rebecca Pregene is opening up with navigating visual branding, designing accessible e-learning experiences for inclusivity. Alan Natachu is going to be running a panel at 10 a.m. Pacific, 1 o'clock Eastern on AI, its potential and its burden. I think that should be a really, really interesting conversation. Would love it if everybody joined that one in and had some feedback and could chat about that one. And then we're closing everything again with a new speaker, Jessica Miles, who is going to be talking about neuro-inclusive learning design to close the event out. And with that, thanks, everybody. Thanks again, Yvonne. And we'll see you all tomorrow. Bye-bye.